The stars outside the viewing window of the human ship Pathfinder glittered like a million distant eyes, silent and unaware of the mistake that was just made. Captain Rhea Morgan stood at the command deck, her eyes locked on the navigation screen as her pilot looked up in confusion. Something had gone wrong, very wrong. The hyperspace jump had not ended where it should have. The stars were unfamiliar, the space around them quiet but heavy, like a room just before someone shouted. Rhea frowned as a red light blinked on her console. The ship's computer warned them with a flat voice, "You have entered a restricted zone. Immediate return is advised." The crew exchanged nervous glances. "Where are we?" someone asked. The ship's AI answered, "Coordinates unknown. You are within the Valtari Dominion." A chill ran down Rhea's spine. Every human officer in the galaxy knew that name. The Valtari were not friends. They were not curious explorers. They were rulers, conquerors of over 100 alien species. Their empire stretched across a quarter of the galaxy. No one entered their space and left alive, not without permission. And permission was never given. Rhea's hand moved calmly over the comm system. "All hands, prepare for first contact," she said, her voice steady even though she could feel the tension rising inside her chest. A moment later, the silence of space was broken by an incoming transmission. The language was strange, sharp, but the ship's translator worked quickly. The voice was cold, commanding. "Human vessel, you have violated the sacred space of the Valtari Dominion. Power down your engines. You are now property of the Emperor." There was no request, only command, and they expected fear. But Captain Rhea did not reach for the power controls. Instead, she folded her arms, her voice steady as steel. "This is Captain Rhea Morgan of the United Earth Exploration Fleet. We do not surrender. We entered this space by mistake, but we bow to no one." Silence followed, a silence that felt like it stretched across the stars. Then, another voice, this one darker, amused, as if watching a small animal that didn't know it was about to be crushed. "You will learn your place," the alien voice said. Within minutes, massive ships appeared on the edge of the system. The Valtari patrol fleet had arrived. Their ships were 5 times the size of Pathfinder, covered in armor, bristling with weapons. The human crew watched as they were surrounded. "Weapons charged," the pilot said, but Rhea shook her head. "No," she said. "Let's see what they do next." The Valtari didn't fire. Instead, they disabled the human ship with an energy beam and locked it in a tractor field. The crew was paralyzed but not harmed. It was not war they wanted, it was a lesson. To them, this was a chance to show the galaxy what happened to those who disrespected their rule. And so, the humans were taken. The trip to the capital world of the Empire was long and quiet. The humans were watched closely, but not tortured. The Valtari believed they didn't need violence to break their spirit. They thought humiliation would be enough. The Empire's capital, Valcaron, was a world of sharp towers, burning skies, and 1,000 alien flags hanging below the great symbol of the Empire. When the humans were marched out into the arena, the crowds roared, not with fear or support, but amusement. Weak creatures, they thought. Soft, fragile beings from a backwater planet. Rhea and her crew were made to stand before the Emperor, a creature 10 feet tall, with glowing eyes and a voice like thunder. "Kneel," the Emperor ordered. "Kneel and live as servants. Stand and die as fools." The human crew stood tall. No one bent a knee. No one lowered their head. Even though they stood in the heart of a mighty empire, watched by millions, threatened by death, they refused. Rhea spoke loud and clear. "We will die standing before we live crawling." The Emperor did not smile. He nodded once. "Then you will prove your worth in the arena." A challenge was declared. One of the humans would face 3 Valtari warriors in a public trial of strength. It was meant to be a display, a punishment in front of billions. But it didn't go as planned. Lieutenant Anders, a quiet soldier from Earth, volunteered. He stepped into the arena wearing only light armor. The Valtari warriors laughed when they saw him. The first one charged and was dropped in seconds by a move they'd never seen before. The second tried a brutal strike, but Anders dodged and used his opponent's own strength to bring him down. The third was careful, smarter, but he too failed when Anders tricked him into a corner and knocked him out. The crowd, once cheering for blood, went silent. The Empire had just seen something it had never expected, a human winning, not just with strength, but with strategy and heart. The Emperor stood, his voice shaking the air. "This changes nothing," he declared, but even he seemed unsure. Back in their cells, the humans waited. They knew this was just the beginning. Rhea sat quietly, staring through the bars. "They don't understand," she said. "They think strength is in power, in size. But our strength is in something else. We don't kneel. Not because we're foolish, but because we know what it means to be free." Outside, the Empire was already whispering. Who were these humans? How had they done this? And why weren't they afraid? In a place where fear ruled for centuries, something new had entered the galaxy by mistake. Yes, but maybe it was a mistake that would change everything. The Empire had expected to break the humans with fear, but instead, something dangerous had happened. They earned attention. Across the Valtari Dominion, people talked in low voices about the small Earth crew that stood tall in front of the Emperor and refused to kneel. But one fight in the arena was not enough to shake an empire built on control and terror. The Emperor, angry but curious, announced a second trial, one that would not only test physical strength, but also spirit, endurance, and willpower. This time, it was designed not as punishment but as a challenge, a way to prove once and for all that the Valtari were superior in every way. The humans would face a series of tasks over 5 days: mental torture simulations, chemical resistance tests, gravity survival, and forced combat scenarios, all under the eyes of 1,000 alien species who were watching closely to see what made these newcomers so different. Captain Rhea Morgan did not protest. She knew they had no choice but to face the trial, but she also knew they had something the Valtari did not understand. Lieutenant Anders, the same man who had won the first arena match, was selected again, along with Lieutenant Sarah Lynn, a former survival trainer who had once lived alone in Earth's most dangerous environments. As the trials began, the audience expected to see humans fail quickly. The first task forced participants into isolation chambers, where a person's mind was bombarded with fear-inducing images and false voices meant to break sanity. Some Valtari soldiers lasted just a few hours before screaming for release. But Anders and Lynn stayed silent, still, breathing slowly. When the doors opened after 20 hours, they walked out with clear eyes, confusing their watchers. The second trial pumped a slow poison into their bloodstream, one that caused burning pain in muscles and bones. Valtari warriors howled after 10 minutes and dropped after 30. Sarah Lynn lasted 45 minutes before collapsing, but Anders, sweating and shaking, lasted over an hour and refused medical help afterward. He simply said, "Pain teaches you something. It's not always bad." The crowd, used to quick defeat, began whispering again. These humans were not immune to pain, but they didn't fear it. They welcomed it. The third trial was a physical, high-gravity simulations meant to crush bones and tear muscle. Most species passed out quickly. Anders crawled, inch by inch, under pressure 5 times what Earth's gravity offered. His bones creaked, his skin turned pale, but he moved forward without stopping. When he finally crossed the finish line, he didn't celebrate. He simply asked if the next trial was ready. The Valtari High Council began watching more closely now, their curiosity turning into quiet concern. The humans should have broken by now. They were outnumbered, outmatched, and alone. Yet they kept rising. On the 4th day, the trial took a new form. Combat. Not the arena, but a closed environment simulating real war, a jungle maze filled with traps, drones, and elite Valtari hunters. The humans were dropped inside without weapons. They were told they had 30 hours to survive or escape. Most expected the trial to end quickly. But the humans adapted. They used pieces of broken machines as weapons. They laid traps using vines and stones. When the Valtari hunters entered, expecting easy targets, they found themselves being watched. One by one, they were picked off, not by strength, but by surprise, patience, and creativity. When the humans finally emerged, bruised, bloodied, but alive, they were met with silence. Not cheers, not anger, just stunned silence. The Empire had never seen this before. A species that did not give in, even when defeat looked certain. A species that didn't fight with just muscle, but with mind, strategy, and something even deeper, belief. By the fifth and final day, even the Emperor began to feel something strange in his chest. Doubt. The last trial was psychological. Each human would be shown visions of Earth under attack, families dying, cities burning, friends crying for help, and they would be told it was real. They would be offered a deal, kneel, and it would all be saved. Stay strong, and their planet would die. The Emperor believed this test would break them. Even the strongest hearts break when loved ones are in danger. Rhea Morgan was the last to take the trial. As she stood before the illusion screen, images of Earth burning played out in horrifying detail. Her home, her people, all gone. A voice whispered in her ear, offering mercy if she would just kneel. But she didn't move. She didn't cry. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and said, "If Earth must fall, it will fall proud. We don't kneel for lies." The illusion flickered, broke apart, and the test ended. The machine could not continue. Her belief had been stronger than the program. When Rhea walked out, her crew stood waiting, injured but alive. They had all passed. And something had changed. In the audience, across 1,000 alien species, seeds of something new began to grow. Some called it hope. Others called it rebellion. But it was the same thing, inspiration. The humans had not brought war or weapons. They had brought an idea that freedom was worth pain, that pride was worth risk, and that courage could be stronger than fear. For centuries, the Valtari had ruled by crushing spirit. But now, spirit was rising. The Emperor, watching from his high tower, stared out at the crowd. He saw not just humans, but thousands of eyes watching them with something he had not seen in a long time: respect. The trials had been designed to humiliate. Instead, they had honored. He turned away from the window, his face tight with thought. "They are different," he muttered. "And difference is dangerous." The humans were returned to their cells, but they were no longer seen as weak prisoners. They were seen as something else. Symbols. A storm was coming, and at its heart were a few brave explorers who had never meant to come here at all. They had arrived by mistake, and now the Empire was starting to feel it. The Valtari Empire had never seen anything like it before: captives who refused to kneel, warriors who endured pain beyond reason, and minds that stayed sharp under pressure that had broken entire species. Whispers spread like wildfire through the Empire's many worlds, from mining colonies on burning planets to luxury stations in orbit around gas giants. Everywhere, the same question rose: who are these humans? The Emperor tried to dismiss them as stubborn creatures lucky to survive the trials, but he knew better. They had something no machine, no army, no genetic enhancement could replicate: willpower that refused to bend. Through tapping on walls, and studied their guards with quiet, careful eyes. Captain Rhea Morgan sat in her cell meditating, while Lieutenant Anders worked his body to the limit. Lieutenant Lin studied maps she had drawn from memory. They were not waiting to be rescued. They were planning. Somewhere in the Empire's deep systems, a low-ranking technician from a conquered race quietly passed messages from the humans to rebel cells forming in secret. The humans had unknowingly lit a fire in the hearts of others. Their pain had become proof that the Empire could be challenged. And the Valtari Council, once proud and arrogant, now met daily in hushed tones, trying to decide what to do before the idea of rebellion spread too far. They considered execution, but even that brought risk. Killing the humans might make them martyrs. Keeping them alive, however, showed weakness. The Emperor grew restless, pacing through halls of polished black stone, remembering the moment Rhea had stared into the illusion of Earth burning and still refused to kneel. It was unnatural. It was dangerous. But it was real. A will like that could not be broken with force. He ordered a new program to begin, one designed to test the very core of human identity. Artificial realities would trap each human inside a world shaped by their fears, losses, and dreams. The goal was simple: rewrite who they were. Break their minds from the inside. The first test was deployed on Anders. In his simulation, Earth had betrayed him. He saw his people trade freedom for peace, saw his captain executed as a traitor, and was offered a chance to live if he abandoned his loyalty. The program expected surrender. Instead, Anders laughed bitterly and whispered, "Even if it were true, I would still stand." The illusion shattered. In another chamber, Sarah Line faced a world where she was the last human alive, surrounded by lies, offered safety by giving up hope. She said nothing for hours, simply walking through the false world until she found the edge and punched through it. "This isn't real," she said, "but my will is." The machines failed to adapt. They had been designed to manipulate logic, not something deeper, something raw, human, and defiant. The Emperor, now truly disturbed, ordered all programs shut down. The humans were returned to their cells, but nothing was the same. Their eyes had changed. They had walked through fire and come out stronger. Around them, the very walls of the Empire seemed less solid, more fragile. Guards hesitated now. Scientists began to question their orders. Rumors of uprising grew louder, carried by silent glances and coded gestures. The humans did not speak of escape anymore. They spoke of endurance. They had realized something powerful. They didn't need to destroy the Empire to win. They just needed to survive long enough for the Empire to destroy itself trying to break them. And so they waited, silent and strong, knowing that their will was becoming a weapon far more dangerous than any ship or gun. The Empire had ruled through fear for centuries, but now, for the first time, it was afraid. Not of invasion, not of war, but of an idea that would not die. The unbreakable will of humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. Something was changing across the Valtari Empire, something that could not be seen in numbers or data, but was deeply felt in every corridor, every hall, every whisper between guards. Fear had shifted its direction. It was no longer just the prisoners who feared their rulers. Now the rulers feared what those prisoners represented. The humans, locked behind magnetic barriers and layered security, had never escaped, never overpowered their guards, never fired a single shot. Yet their defiance had spread like a virus. It began with small things: guards hesitating to use full force, a technician secretly delaying a cruel order, a scientist pausing before running the next psychological test. None of them knew why, not fully. But deep inside, they had seen something in the humans they did not see in themselves: resistance without rage, strength without cruelty, a kind of courage that felt both alien and inspiring. In one of the outer colonies, a group of laborers, inspired by smuggled recordings of the human prisoners refusing to kneel, suddenly stopped working. When threatened with death, they stared silently at the soldiers and then turned away. The soldiers didn't shoot. That single act of quiet rebellion shook the planet's governor. In the capital, the Emperor's council grew divided. Some wanted to crush the humans completely, others suggested using them to learn the secret of their strength, but no one had real control anymore. The fear of rebellion had grown into paranoia. High-ranking officials began accusing each other of weakness, of sympathy toward human ideals, of disloyalty. The unity that had held the Empire together for generations began to fracture. One general, furious that his fleet had been halted near Earth sector due to political caution, resigned publicly, something no officer had ever done before. A respected scientist disappeared after requesting permission to speak directly with the human prisoners. On mining stations and research labs, the phrase "be like the humans" started appearing, scratched into walls, whispered in secret. It was not about humans as warriors, but as symbols of unbroken will in the face of cruelty. The Emperor, once seen as a living god, now appeared more cautious, more reactive. He avoided public appearances. Even his most loyal guards noticed the difference in his walk, the nervous glances he gave to the shadows of his throne room. He ordered surveillance on his own council, fearing betrayal. A society built on perfect control was now devouring itself from the inside. Meanwhile, in their prison, the humans remained unchanged. They trained, observed, waited. Captain Rhea Morgan received a coded message through food packaging, a message from a Voltari defecting to the rebellion. It said, "Your silence has spoken louder than our loudest wars. We are with you." She didn't smile, but she did nod. That night, she instructed her team to begin preparing for something new, not escape, but collapse. They would not break out. They would hold the line until the Empire broke down around them. Strange things started happening. Supply lines were delayed. Orders were confused. Ship captains argued with Central Command. Entire squads disappeared without explanation. On one planet, a full battalion refused to follow an order to destroy a rebel village. In the Empire's core, information leaks revealed cruel experiments done on many species, including children. Public trust cracked. Protests began. And all the while, in the dark cells of the Empire's most secure prison, the humans waited not as prisoners, but as the quiet storm that had started shaking the galaxy. The Voltari had built their empire on fear, but now that fear was turning inward, consuming their own. The strongest walls were no longer enough. The loudest threats were no longer believed. Somewhere deep in space, an empire had begun to fall, not because of warships or weapons, but because it tried to break something unbreakable. The humans had survived everything, and that survival had revealed every crack in the Empire's armor. What came next would not be led by armies, but by the idea that no empire could ever truly control the will of those who refused to kneel. The silence after the storm was not peace. It was the space where choices are made and destinies are decided. As the mighty Voltari Empire crumbled from the inside, torn apart by fear, betrayal, and rebellion, a strange kind of calm settled across the galaxy. But in that calm, leaders of scattered worlds, long oppressed and broken, now looked toward Earth, not with suspicion, but with hope. The humans, who had once been unknown wanderers in the stars, were now seen as something else entirely. Not conquerors, not invaders, but survivors, warriors who had faced the worst cruelty and never surrendered their spirit. In the heart of an ancient star system, neutral ground was chosen, a ruined station once used for trade, now repaired for a greater purpose. From every edge of space, ships arrived, some small and rusting, others sleek and fast. Delegates from former slaves, old rebels, betrayed officers, and hidden colonies came to that station, drawn not by power, but by the one thing they had never trusted before: unity. The humans arrived last. Captain Rhea Morgan stepped off her transport in silence, followed by her crew, all wearing plain uniforms without medals. There were no greetings at first, only watchful eyes, silent nods, and the shared weight of suffering. Then, one by one, representatives stood to speak, not to boast, not to bargain, but to tell the truth. Each voice carried a story of loss, of pain, of endurance. And then came the stories of how the humans' defiance had inspired them, how they had refused to bow, refused to bake, refused to break. One Voltari officer, once loyal to the Emperor, now stood trembling as he admitted what he had done and what he had seen. "We thought strength was domination," he said. "But they showed us that strength is standing when the world wants you on your knees." No applause followed, only silence, deep and respectful. Then Rhea spoke, her voice steady. She did not talk of revenge or glory, but of duty. "The Empire is not just falling," she said. "It's leaving a vacuum. If we don't stand together, something worse will rise in its place." Her words were not grand, but they settled in the hearts of all who heard. A new alliance was not just about ships and armies, it was about shared purpose. Agreements were made, not with threats or bribes, but with mutual trust. Resources would be shared, planets protected, the weak defended, and war criminals hunted not for vengeance, but for justice. It was not perfect. There were arguments, fears, even threats, but no one walked away. For the first time in centuries, enemies sat beside each other, not as rivals, but as survivors ready to rebuild. In that station, a charter was signed not by diplomats or emperors, but by people who had bled, suffered, and endured. They called it the Concord of the Free. At its heart was a promise. No one would rule over others again through fear. Earth was given no throne, no seat of power, but it was given something more: respect. The humans did not lead with weapons, but with example. Their story was written into the Alliance's core, not as myth, but as memory, a warning to any future tyrant that the will of the free could never be broken. As the meeting ended, Rhea walked alone to the edge of the station, looking out at the stars. Around her, dozens of ships left one by one, carrying the birth of something new across the galaxy. She knew the future would not be easy. Peace was never simple, and unity was fragile. But now, they had something stronger than fear, hope forged in fire. Behind her, footsteps approached. A young alien commander, barely more than a child, saluted her and said, "My people thought you were demons. Now we know better. Thank you for not becoming what they feared." Rhea gave a small nod, her eyes still on the stars. The war was not over, not completely. There would be resistance, betrayals, setbacks. But now, they would not fight alone. A new alliance had been born, not from conquest, but from courage. And across the stars, from the dark ruins of the Empire to the farthest free colonies, that courage burned like a light, silent, steady, unyielding. The age of fear was ending. The age of unity had begun.